business owners come to you saying, my mate's just implemented this, I want to implement it. And you kind of think, well, hang on, why? I understand you're in similar fields, you're in similar industries, but
It's time to down tools for a bit. Welcome to the ToolShed, the influential podcast for anyone and everyone involved in the building industry. Here's your host, Mick Hawes.
Hey there, before we kick off, I want to share a really important thought. 71% of you who watch this channel frequently don't subscribe. So if you've enjoyed any video you've ever watched, can you do me a favor and hit the subscribe button? It helps the channel more than you think, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests get. So let's go. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the ToolShed Podcast. In this episode, I'm speaking to Andrew Sirianni. He created a company called Decode. They specialize in all sorts of custom software, digital experiences, automation, all of those sorts of things. And we got into a really deep and interesting conversation about how best to use automation, how to examine the touch points that you have in your business where there's some form of connection between your business and your prospect or your business and your client, and how important it is to identify the quality of each of those touch points, where to use automation, to make sure that you're not dehumanizing your business. One of the things we unpacked, and I've talked about it in previous episodes, is you've got to be a little bit careful about thinking, oh, I can get that off my plate, and I don't have to do that anymore because I can use AI or I can use automation. My suspicion is that because of the massive integration of AI and bots and all of these sorts of things to replace the need for a human to do something, it's going to create a vacuum, a need, a desire for the prospects and the clients to want to be able to speak to a human. So we kind of unpack that and make sure we give you the idea and the information that you need to make sure you don't overreach, don't overstep with automation and AI, and have a focus on how can you use it to do all of the back end stuff, the thing stuff. But when there's an interaction with a human customer or prospect, how do we expand that? So, you're creating great experiences for your prospects and clients. So look forward to that conversation with Andrew. Before we go to that conversation, I just want to remind you about the Builders Freedom Readiness Scorecard. And the purpose of that is if you've been in business for, let's say, 10 years and you're still coming up against a bit of financial distress, like struggling to pay the bass from time to time, robbing Peter to pay Paul, and just constantly in cash flow challenges, and that's creating a bit of stress for you. Or perhaps you don't have the amount of free time away from the business, and what I mean by free time is being able to step away without your mind being back there, and you think, oh, I hope that's being done, and what if this happens, and you're just not really enjoying that time off. If that is you, there are some simple solutions to begin to turn that around, right? I'm not purporting that I've got the solution and it's a magic pill and everything will instantly change. It will just help you identify where you need to get started. But by doing the scorecard, it will give you a score as to where you are. Based on where you are, we will send you a PDF report that says, based on where you are now, here are some suggestions and some specific actions that you can focus on to begin to turn that around. And also, if those suggestions don't quite make sense, or you need a bit of a hand to implement them, I don't have an issue with you reaching out to me. You can jump on LinkedIn. Like, I'm pretty easy to find, and more than happy to get into a conversation with you to be able to help you make sense of it and clear things up so you can input that information so you can actually use that information. So it will be useful, not just another thing, oh, that's good, and it goes in the drawer and that's the last you see of it. Like we can help you integrate that, implement it so it becomes valuable. So anyway, enough of that. Let's get into this conversation with Andrew Sirianni. Enjoy the conversation. Andrew, welcome to the ToolShed. The company is called Decode. From what I understand, it's custom software, business design, and also branding, e-commerce, and something that I'm quite interested in, a bit of a nerd, workflow automation and things like that. So we'll get into the deets of that in a little while, but the first question I tend to always ask is, how did you end up there? Like, what was going on in your life that caused you to go in the direction of geeking out with all of this cool stuff? What happened?
Look, it was an interesting one. Essentially, what happened was I started out of school straight away as an accountant.
All right.
By the Big Four, and was sort of doing accounting, compliance, and what so from there. I quickly realised the larger businesses probably weren't my strong suit, and I was kind of really interested to engage sort of in smaller businesses where I could have a big impact. So I went into management consulting, and by virtue of that, went into mergers and acquisitions. Through that process, we couldn't find any software off the shelf to do what we were doing. So we were doing a lot of business valuations, we were doing forecasting, we were doing modeling, and we just couldn't find the software off the shelf to help us do what we were doing. So I said to the boss one day, I said, look, do you mind if I tinker with some software in the background? Because I had the software as well, and see if I can build something that'll just take the things that we're doing and cutting and pasting, and it will just automate those workflows. So I built some software, and we actually found that immediately we had a 400% increase in the output.
Wow.
We were able to share.
That's not much, only 400%.
Well, it was
you should try harder.
I was pretty excited. So what happened was we were able to sort of take away a lot of the work that was seniors were doing and delegate it to junior staff, because you didn't have to teach them the process. The software did it. The benefit is we weren't cutting and pasting Excel, so we were sort of getting a lot more accuracy in the workflow. And then it created all these new opportunities in the business, and that was where we started to get pretty excited, because we were able to do benchmarking, we were able to do sort of modeling, we were able to look into the data and produce industry reports, do training. And I sort of started thinking, geez, this is actually pretty good. So then we got into sort of the mergers and acquisition side, and we're actually doing business broking, and we were doing the sale of the properties and so forth. And again, we couldn't find anything off the shelf. So we built a workflow management system that did that end to end. And we were able to enter the market. We were able to automate all of our paperwork, all of our documentation, the workflows. We had virtual data rooms. We did all the real estate documentation. And it just meant that we were able to get up and running very quickly, build market share very quickly in an industry that was sort of fairly old. So at that point, I sort of started thinking, geez, this sounds like this is where it's exciting. It's kind of, I enjoyed doing the numbers, I enjoyed doing the computational side, but seeing what we could do with businesses by effectively just working out, this is what we know we do day to day. How do we automate those processes and then put people into that? And seeing the output was phenomenal. So I started Decode, and that was the main thing, to see, well, look, how many businesses are out there that are doing something different, that are doing something unique, can't quite find what they want off the shelf, or are sort of juggling with a lot of different pieces of the puzzle. How can we sort of build these tools for them so they can do exactly what they want?
Yeah, great story. I want to get a little bit into the philosophical side of this as well, because my experience is, particularly with the younger generation, because they obviously grew up with technology and they're not afraid of it like us old Luddites. Or, I actually like it a lot, but but there are plenty of people around my age that don't like it so much. But the younger generations seem to just deal with it as a matter of fact. And what I'm noticing is, particularly in the building industry, there is a propensity for the younger generations to try and automate everything. And my feeling is that it's a great idea to automate that sort of back end stuff, but the communication between the company and the prospect, or the company and the client, I just feel that too much of it's going to dehumanize the relationship. I think particularly with the way AI is going and all that sort of stuff, people are just trying to get everything off their plate they possibly can. My suspicion is that's going to create a vacuum, of people that are clients that are really pining for speaking to a human again.
100%. And look, you've hit the nail on the head. And I actually had an interesting LinkedIn discussion with somebody the other day about the same thing. They sort of said, I'm getting 5-6 calls a week from people talking about implementing AI and all of the backwards and forwards on how it can automate your business and do everything. But he had all these customers that were calling him saying, mate, I've been trying to call these other businesses, but all I'm speaking to are AI robots. I just want to speak to a person. Can I just get the job done?
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree anymore. And we are implementing voice AI systems, but the AI systems that we're implementing for voice are the things to help the job move along, or to follow up on things that you might not have time to do. But if a quick check-in or a quick validation throughout the day can add a whole lot of value. But then that frees the admin time up to then engage with people at the start, engage with people in the process, check in manually through it and make sure things are all okay. I think the reality is that the same as everything, you can't just throw technology at something without a clear path. I mean, technology is part of a wider system that includes the people, it includes your stakeholders, it includes your customers, and you need to do it in a way that's going to enhance the way that you're all communicating and managing things together. So I think that working out how you can automate those processes that are very low value add or very low touch points, but help sort of in that process, is a great opportunity. But ensuring that you still have the opportunity to engage, talk, build relationships, that's obviously going to be a key part.
Yeah. It's an interesting time, just to see what's going on. And my suspicion is that the businesses that use what you're talking about to do all of the back end, the thing stuff, rather than the person to person, like trying to replace the person to person stuff. I think the people, if they use the automation to take care of what you're saying, to free themselves up to be able to have even more human to human contact than they had before, I think that those businesses are going to thrive. I'm sure that you've had plenty of conversations with people that have gone, is that even possible? So what are some of the things that you've been able to automate, like in workflow or management systems, that people have gone, oh, I didn't know that was possible? But like there's so many things that can be done that people just never ever think of, and they think, well, I'm the only one who can do it, and they get stuck in that rut.
Yeah, look, I think the best part of my job is it's not always us coming up with the solutions. 9 times out of 10, it's the business owner or the people in the business who are running into these problems and saying, look, I'm facing this every day. How do I improve the way these are happening in my day? What can I do to optimize the way that these things are running? And so they give us the idea. So I can't take a lot of credit for this, but I mean, we've dealt with a company that deal in soil remediation. So effectively, you're looking to deposit soil, you take it to sort of one of these tip sites, and they're sort of operating on behalf of a farmer, an old quarry, or etc. Well, they had 36 different legal entities that they were basically taking manual paperwork or weighbridges, sending them into the office, manually entering them into their account system, and then sort of sending out the invoices. Well, we sort of, when we first looked at it, we sort of thought, geez, how do we improve this? We looked at the way that they were doing, and we ended up building a portal for them where they could take the information through real time, take pre-auths on the credit card as the trucks were coming through, and then process the invoices sort of real time at the end of the day. So we were able to get it down from up to 3 months between getting the weighbridge dockets and the loads from the truck through to invoicing down to sort of end of business day.
Wow.
We had another company that has 250 electrical contractors, and their biggest issue was just trying to find out when the guys were actually on site, because a lot of their guys weren't going to 10 or 12 different jobs through the day. So what we did is we linked up their navman system that all their guys were in trucks, and we just basically flagged when they arrived to site, when they left to site, and used that to cross-reference their timesheets so we could get clear and accurate information on when people were on the site and when they weren't on the site. And a lot of people ask me, they say, well, look, isn't that being a little bit too sort of imposing on the staff or whatnot?
Big brother.
A little bit, yeah. But the reality is that, this business is obviously paying the contractors for the work. So you've got to kind of be fairly fair and reasonable.
Yeah.
The other one was a point of safety too. He was saying, well, what happens if you get guys rock up on site? They're expected to leave by a certain time and they don't.
Yeah.
You need to be able to know that. We also had a trucking company that we did work for, and they had a huge problem where at the end of the day, sometimes they'd get these dockets come through for the truck and they wouldn't be able to have them signed. So we set up an automated AI system that would call the driver, because obviously they're on the road, you don't want to send them a message, and just say, hey, look, we noticed that you were on this job today, you were running on this job, you haven't got your docket in. Is there any reason, do you need us to help to get that signed? So we could get the dockets all signed, get them validated by the customer, and get them through at the end of the day from there. So there are a few of the sort of ideas that sort of, we've been working on. And some of these, used to have admin teams of between 3 to 8 people just checking on these fairly low level tasks, nothing that couldn't be automated. It didn't take anyone's job. In fact, it freed them up to do other value add processes and build engagements with their customers, build engagements with their stakeholders that really helped them in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a fair bit of, the concern and stress about, the automation, blah, 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 going to take my job. But I mean, it's happened throughout history. I don't know how many times, like we used to have horses pulling ploughs through and people driving and, now you got tractors and you don't have all of the people with a scythe or a hoe, a tractor will do it. And we found other things to do, probably more rewarding things. We got to keep growing. Something was going through my mind just about running across redundancy. Like, do you guys have a conversation with a client when you're sort of discovering what they're trying to do? Do you unpack the purpose of what they're trying to do? And I say that from the perspective of I often run across, even in our coaching business, we work with husband and wife run residential building businesses. That's our crosshairs, if you like. And they'll ask about how do we overcome this problem, and the automatic thought process is we need a solution to this problem, and quite often it's like a virtual assistant or an automation of some description, and my brain always goes to, is it even necessary? Like I love prevention over cure. Like,
yes,
do we even need to worry about this anymore? And I've seen it so many times that we've kind of habituated ourselves over the years into following this process. We've always done this. And then there's something that has appeared, an automation, or this thing becomes redundant, but we're so habituated into it, we just still do it. And we're wasting time and money. How do you see that? Is there a process that you go through to ask, like to unpack what we're doing here?
Definitely. Look, ultimately, we see it in a number of processes. Like the first is you see the business owners come to you saying, "My mate's just implemented this. I want to implement it," and you kind of think, "Well, hang on, why? I understand you're in similar fields, you're in similar industries, but this is their workflow. This is your workflow. They're completely separate." We also see it too that often you get sort of pushed down from the top down, where they effectively say, we want AI in the business. And it's kind of like, okay, why do you
We've
want
seen
AI?
this thing on the internet. We need it.
That's right. And so generally what we'll do is we'll sit down. And the third thing on that too, is we often see people trying to automate exactly what they're doing now. We really sit down with people to sort of say, well, look, before you're ready to do that, why don't we just work out what your end-to-end process is? What is your actual end-to-end process, and how do we systemize that? Because there's always going to be some parts in it that you can't automate, or it's not efficient to automate yet. So we sort of work through that workflow and say, well, what's the goals? What's the objectives? What are you trying to achieve? What makes you unique? What can we replicate with the system? And then how do we build that and see how it's actually going? So it's sort of, I guess, planning what to do, why we're doing it, and then what the outcomes are, and are we getting improvements in those outcomes or not? And I think that's the process that we generally sort of plan through with a client, where we almost map their workflow end to end offline, work out where are the opportunities to improve, what are the systems they use, what are the checks and balances they need, and what's the information they need out of their platform, and then start to build a system around that. And one of the benefits we see is that when you're building in a custom space, you don't actually have to build everything and anything, and you're not constrained by something that's off the shelf and that already has these functions in it that you need to conform to. So we just need to identify the core parts. We build that first, and then we can leverage and adjust as we go from there.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the majority of the listeners to this podcast are residential builders. So as a rule, they're quite a small business. They might have perhaps half a dozen in the team or something like that, and so they would be listening to this potentially and going, I'm not big enough to get that custom software or to get that custom solution, and they'll tend to just look around the interwebs to see what they can find off the shelf. Is that an appropriate thought process about this, or do you have people that you work with that are kind of in that smaller business, the small business side of things? Because it does sound like it's a bit sort of medium to large type stuff when you start to talk about custom software, but it's not necessarily the case, I'm assuming.
Look, I think coming back to your last point, the key is knowing what you're looking to build. And I think that's the key. It's not if you're small, medium, or large-size businesses. It's how clear are you on what your objectives are. Generally, what I'd say is that medium to larger businesses will generally know exactly what they want. They've played around with the system. They've played around with the processes. They've got a workflow in place, whether it's manual or automated. Like a lot of the guys that we've built tools for will give us a physical file, and with all of their sheets, all their worksheets in it, and say, this is our process. This is what we want to develop an automation for. So I don't think it's necessarily working out whether you're a small, medium, or large business. We've done work for businesses that 2 to 5 people, right up to businesses that are turning over 10 million a week. So the scale can be fairly significant. What the consistent parameter is and what works really well is knowing what you want. The difficulty, and a lot of the pushback we get in the custom space, is if you just go to a custom developer like us and say, I'm a residential builder, build me a system, we don't know you from a bar of soap. We don't know what your outputs are. We don't know what your workflows are. We might be looking at something we've done for somebody else, and that's our context. It's not clear. So you're going to garbage in, garbage out. That's what you're basically going to get. So I don't think it's necessarily a case of putting yourself into a bracket of, is custom sort of, does it have like a flaw, so to speak? It doesn't really have a flaw, but what makes a big difference is knowing exactly what you want, being clear on the parameters. Where we've seen businesses go well is they have a small scope, they've got clear objectives on what they want and outcomes that are measurable out of it, and they go from there. Where we've seen it fail is people have been too confused over how to sort of clearly ask what they want. They've either tried to throw too much too soon, and it's got way overcomplicated in the early phases, or they just haven't really understood the steps and the balances from there. So I think that if you're looking to go down this space, the key is you need to know what you're looking for. my recommendation is always, if you can find what you want off the shelf, use that. It's going to be a lot more tried and tested. You're going to get a lot more scalability out of it. 9 times out of 10, you'll understand a lot more about how to run businesses, because you'll get ideas from this software provider on how to, others are running their business. And so that'll help you get to a certain level. Then when you're a little bit clearer on what you want to do and how you want to apply changes, then start to look at how you can automate steps of your business.
I think the philosophical gold in what you've just said then, which could be applied to every part of their business, is what's the purpose? Like what's the objective, and why is that? Like you can even go, well, that's the objective, but why? Yeah. Why have you decided that that's an objective? Like we need to unpack 100%. It and get the purpose. I also noticed on your website you mentioned digital experiences, and I want to know what a digital experience is. And can I have one?
Basically, the way that the process works is we don't look at the system as just a checkbox of workflows. We look at the system as giving you that end-to-end workflow, the end-to-end engagement, and the assistive process all the way through it. Now, a lot of the businesses we deal with have a core element of the internal staff that are running the organization. Then you've also got the external stakeholders. You might have contractors, you might have clients, you might have material providers and so forth. They're all engaging with it. So that sort of, I guess, creates this digital experience that they all have dealing with you and your company. Particularly nowadays, I mean, regardless of where we see AI going, where we see a lot of these online tools going, every business is effectively a software business. You've got touch points with software, whether it be your accounting system, whether it be your quoting system, whether it be your emails and notifications. It all forms part of this digital experience. And I guess sort of going back to what we were talking about just earlier, understanding and mapping how people are going to be part of that digital experience is a key to making sure that it's a happy experience all the way through, rather than just checking and validating checkboxes along the way. So that's the keys. The digital experience is the engaging and sort of, I guess, bringing people together and understanding all of their touch points and making sure that their touch points are quick and easy, provide value to the organization, and help to make them happy as well, which is not always easy to do with technology.
No, but it's raised another thought in my mind. We had a guest on the podcast whose name's Andrew Griffiths, and he wrote a book that is called "Someone Needs to Be the Most Expensive. Why Not Make It You?" But if you're going to be the most expensive, you have to be the best. And part of that book, he talks about the quality of the touch points, and if you're going to be the best business, you've got to look at each individual touch point. And he has this example of going to the dentist, and you're sitting there listening to the audio book, and he just unpacks this whole experience from setting the appointment to what happens after you've had the interaction with the dentist. But the amount of detail he goes into about everything about that experience, it's like touch points are so important. And if you can map out every single touch point and go give it a score, like you've just said, what's the experience like for that touch point, and how could we make it better? And it's sort of, I would imagine that it would be a process a little like painting the Sydney Harbour Bridge. You'd get to the end and you just got to start again, and you just keep improving and improving. So
that's the thing.
Yeah. Really interesting thought processes. So somebody going, I think I need some help. I think I could improve our client experience and definitely improve the back end of our business with a bit more automation and a bit of a hand in that space. And they're thinking perhaps I should reach out. What's the process of reaching out to you guys, and once they did, what would be their what would be the expectation of the experience? What would you go through with them?
Yeah, look, I think the first thing is really just to have a chat and understand how far have they progressed on their own with looking into it. As I alluded to before, I definitely don't think this is good for people if they haven't considered and really planned out what they want to get out of it first, and that means, understanding their systems and processes, having a clear identification of, what tools are already out there, what tools aren't already out there, what fits, what doesn't fit, how can we sort of work from there. Generally, sort of the way we sort of work is we just want to have a bit of a conversation with people first, just understand about their business, see how they operate. Where possible, we actually like to go out and see the team on site, see how they're actually working, get a bit of an idea of, what the feedback is, what the request is from the management, but what are the actual team doing on site? Is there any difference in sort of what they're seeing? We also start to then go through a bit of a discovery phase to look at, okay, what are the outcomes? What makes your business unique? What are the off-the-shelf tools that you've considered? Why and why don't they work? And what are the internal processes? And then if all looks good, then we would normally say that we would actually do a design and planning and strategy session just to map out and say, well, look, this is what we think could work. And this might be phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Does this sort of float well with you? Can you see the benefits in this? Can you see that this is going to work? And then we would look to build it from there. So it's sort of a fairly involved process, and I'd sort of almost put it to the lines of other consultants in terms of sort of your accountants, your financial advisors, solicitors, and so forth, who you're not going to go to and just say, draw me up a will or draw me up a partnership agreement or restructure my businesses in the way that they're structured so that it's better for scaling and so forth. They're really going to come on a journey with you to understand, well, hang on, what are you looking to do? Why are you looking to make those improvements? What are the outcomes you need and you'd like to achieve? And then once you get a handle of that, then give you a couple of different options. And we work very similarly on that. So it's a very exploratory process where we sort of do spend a lot of time just getting to know you, getting to know the business, getting to know what's happening. And then we start to look at, okay, well, here are the 3 or 4 different options that might work. Let's start to dive into those and see what the options might be from there.
Yeah. That sounds fantastic. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast and sharing your experience and your story as to how you got into this space. Good to meet a fellow nerd, I suppose, that loves that sort of stuff. Yeah, folks, go and check out Decode. We're going to make sure we put all of the links to the website and so forth in the description. But thanks for being on the podcast.
No, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, and always lovely to chat to people and sort of, hear a little bit more, gain a bit of insight on questions and comments across the industry as well.
Yeah, great stuff. Thank you, Andrew.
No worries. Thanks very much.
You've been listening to the ToolShed. If this podcast struck a chord with you, make sure you spread the word by sharing it with your mates in the building industry. We love your help to make the building industry better for everyone involved.